The Scars Above tries to channel games like The Longest Journey, The Medium, and mix them together with Dark Souls or Returnal, but regardless of an interesting story and gameplay ideas that are occasionally refreshing, it has a difficult time elevating above an average shooter with some good exploration. Scars Above does try to hold on to those comparisons, though, with its gameplay, mysteriously shifting crystals that save your essence, resulting in time resetting with enemies respawning, and locations being the last place that you'll return to if you die. Exploring what has happened after your spaceship crashes when investigating an alien satellite, the game employs hostile environments, exploration, and interconnected paths and shortcuts, unlocking as you consistently push Dr. Kate Ward forward into alien oblivion. Speaking of Oblivion, throwing videos out into YouTube is sometimes like that. ACG is my brand. It's me. My sponsor's me. If you get a chance, subscribe. You're going to see a bunch more reviews from me, including Wulong. There are more videos as well. Hit the notify all button. Where many Dark Souls games entrap the story behind a mystery that can at times feel impenetrable to a normal consumer, Scars Above is much more by the numbers, eliciting cutscenes and story snippets to help the player along as they find out what's happened to the crew as well as themselves after the crash. Exploring alien locations, taking out enemies while there, finding shortcuts, locating clues, and then defeating bosses, and unlocking more shortcuts make up the game's 7+ hours of gameplay. Combat in Scars Above is a third-person ranged kind of game, with basic up-close attacks backed up by a scientifically styled sword for when the character runs out of ammo for the various environmental types that they may have. Each one of these elemental attacks works slightly differently, but in the expectations you'll have for a lot of shooters. And since this is a stamina game, you're always trying to decide which to do. For example, shooting an enemy can cause some to heat up and explode, but cutting them up with your vibro sword is more dangerous and at the same time uses stamina, but it keeps that ammo for later enemies. And it's not always without cool ideas. For example, freezing ammo normally lobs out like a slingshot, but splits into a shotgun blast type, mixing the gameplay up a little bit. But this extends to an excellent moment where the game has you freeze water against a boss so that you can walk on it while alien flesh-eating creatures swim just below the surface. Truly interesting ideas actually do come out in Scars Above a couple times throughout its length. Upgrades, improvements, and technology surprises like adding personal shields or testing out gas grenades that need another shot to ignite them are all done via an in-person crafting machine that unlocks a little bit into the game. Other less and more straightforward ammo types keep the player engaged somewhat, and there are enough differences to keep you wondering what's going to come up next or how they can be used together. And while there are tangible but still somewhat tangential connections and comparisons that can be made between Scars Above and Returnal, they don't really feel anything alike. Scars Above leans far closer to Mass Effect in the typical third-person style combat, speed, and weight and inertia that you feel in that game versus the flicky and bursty movement that elevates Returnal to a dance of death with either you or the enemy as the dance floor, respectively. While combat and exploration are both big parts of the gameplay here in Scars Above, story isn't ignored and it isn't doled out without interaction from the gamer. This is one of the better parts of the game, as the combat isn't necessarily strong, while the story, also not necessarily anything new that you wouldn't see in a B-level show or movie, is at least told with some surprises and interactions with you as the player. The investigation moments of futuristic Sherlock Holmes at times channels The Martian as you investigate and science the shit out of stuff to fix it. You're looking into the sciences of aliens, of the crash that you were involved in, and the planet itself, telling story through pinpointing parts of interesting moments within the game world or the aliens that you find, and learning more about them using their highlights. There's an obvious hereditary mixture here with movies like The Martian, where sciencing the shit out of something can save your life, and Scars Above reflects that original thought process and those ideas profoundly well. For example, consistently sending the player out to collect and analyze alien life forms on the world. Every enemy has a detailed repository of information and a breakdown of why some chemical mixture within some unknown gland causes a specific function. The more this continues, the further the almost infection-like outgrowth of noticing these parts of the game world continues. As you begin to look around, the memory of an analysis you did earlier on a defeated boss causes you to find out where their fury comes from or where some different poison or chemical actually works in their body. And these elements of investigation are the best parts of the game. And that's because while you jump into combat, it never really feels great. Occasionally, the game can feel like a Dark Souls or Returnal, and it's more forgiving than both as well at the same time. While still being able to die easily if not paying attention, the game's 3 difficulties do let you cater the experience more than those other titles. It's just that regardless of which difficulty you choose, the hardest activity in the game is piecing it all together when it comes to the gameplay into one cohesive experience. This continues throughout the presentation, with the game offering a number of options as well as settings for all the effects in the game world, as well as an in-game resolution setting to get back FPS. But even on the 4090, randomly about once every unlockable location, the frame rate would drop by 20 to 30% for a while, just dropping low and then for some reason popping back up. Now, this isn't the stutter that we talk about in a lot of other games. It was just a lower FPS overall. This would or could happen during a boss battle or mini boss battle, but it was just as likely to happen as you were being provided story by an audio log. Graphically, the game does reflect a budget price with ancient character models and a lot of untracked lip syncing, or rougher even more than that, generalized alien design as well. This was sluggish in its delivery of new enemy types too. The game tries to hit a budget Mass Effect look, and it does occasionally. It also tries to hit a Returnal style look, and it does less so. The structure and delivery of moody alien world designs does remind you of some of these prior titles, but it never really steps up to be their equal. The Doctor's lackadaisical animations are also something that you notice. It's an almost desperate disagreement with the situation she's actually in. Even sprinting during a boss battle looks like a Sunday warm-up for an over 50s walking group. She climbs, but many times doesn't really seem to interact with the landscape, and sadly, those are also times when you see the texture's poor quality, the overall lack of complexity in the locations, and a genuinely dire state of detail and color. And while some of those can be described away with budget, some of them can't. Speaking of budget, let's talk about the audio presentation. Voice. Scars Above tries. It certainly tries. It's not without its moments of story that cause you to wonder what's going to happen next, or being interested in how it's all going in the first place. But much of the delivery is a bit wooden, stilted, and more like reading than acting moments. This happens later on in the story more than it does at the starting. This is also reflected in terrible cutscene lip syncing, which syncs up at the end to look more like a game 2 generations ago than something more current. It's helped by a story, like I said, that is at least interesting if you can buy into it. The delivery is not the greatest. When it comes to the music, this is good though. It's moody and synth heavy. Much of the music in Scars Above skews closer to Mass Effect than, say, the more recent Atomic Heart. And while both do share that overall similar reverberating synth tone, the microtones of Atomic Heart are not here. It is more melodic like a Mass Effect. It's some kind of middle ground though. It's actually quite good, most easily reflected by that main menu music you hear right at the starting. That's a good theme and style that reflects the sci-fi vibes that you expect. It's less orchestral than a big budget AAA science game or science title, but it's actually pretty memorable to at least feel like its own thing. At times it's haunting, other times it's a bit more modern. The music in Scars Above builds on the tension of the story from the first moments to the last, and is one of the highlights in the presentation. Something that can be said for the sound. This is pretty much bog standard. It has a workmanship style delivery to everything, from the gunshots to alien locations, the weather effects, and the enemies screeching their alien hate at you as they flex their special attacks in your direction. Guns, explosions, weapon charges, lasers scanning alien life forms sound pretty much exactly as you would expect in any game. There is a lack of surprise here when it comes to the tonal delivery that is something that you sort of notice right away. Budget doesn't always mean bad, and that's where fun factor can come into this. Weaponry built from science but using the ecology of the world around you is fascinating. It's an idea that I love. Increasingly less impactful though as you play, because much of the game here rests on that cool part, but really does end up just being elements like ice and electricity, regardless of their trappings around them. Where Scars Above does try to branch out is letting you combo them. For example, in locations where it's raining, using freezing ammo on enemies freezes them much more quickly. You can combo enemies in water with electricity as well, taking out them in shocking groups as they come after you. Things that we have seen before, but the science background at least sells it a little bit more, and I like that a lot. Unfortunately, regardless of the difficulty that you chose, the combat didn't feel good enough to crank it up to the highest, and didn't feel like there was really any reason to adjust it. It's also the level design that has some issues, where this game really seems to fall down. Backed by rough textures and generic locations, even the shortcuts are really nothing more than a crack in a rock or a place to shimmy through to a different location. Nothing is hidden or secret or rewarding to find, and most open up into a two-choice fork that offers a meal that looks like a diet or something that tastes even worse. Much of Scars Above feels like something a bit more ambitious could have been done here, but the budget probably held them back. They did spend a lot of time on some parts that definitely matter, but it just doesn't seem like enough. As you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system, with rent being replaced by deep sale on PC titles. Like laying down new pavement on a damaged road, the whole bumps and unevenness gets sort of leveled out, and in many ways that same connective tissue such as story or shared feel of gameplay spaces from cutscene to action scene and sensible connection of actions in a game can do the same thing, evening over some of the more bouncy parts. This minigame fits in here, and this moment fits here. This story connects them, and it's something that you can begin to move past even that unevenness that we see in some titles. It takes more than Scars Above can offer. It hits sometimes, but most of the time it's different parts that do not come together enough and lets us see a destination, but right before we get there, there's a detour to a shortcut that is just sort of boring. I would rate this as a wait, even on the budget. Games like this are okay. They can have amazing ideas, and Scars Above science it out moments could have blossomed out into something truly interesting. The feeling of figuring things out is almost there. It just needs to be a bit more of that focus. And while it may sound like I disliked this game, I absolutely did not. It's just that I didn't like it either. It's that moment you meet someone new and you find them to be interesting enough to keep talking to, but consistently question if that one initial response was all they have. And then just at the moment that you think you're going to leave, they say something else that sparks your interest up again. As a reminder, we don't do sponsors here. It's just me. Subscribe to the channel if you like these reviews. Stay tuned for more. Thank you very much for listening. Peace out, and gang gang.
It's working. Did the metahedron bring us here?
Since the dawn of humankind, our species has gazed toward the skies and wondered whether we were truly alone.